What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. And I wanted to talk about a silver lining after this disastrous outcome for the heavyweight title fight where I picked Cyril Gane, and I was really looking forward to seeing him finish that fight because I really do think Cyril Gane was on his way to victory. Now, I know it was only one round, and you can't say it's too much of a premature conclusion to draw. It's not fully fair, but I do feel as though he was on his way to winning. I think Tom, either he had a broken nose or something. His breathing was impaired. He was breathing heavily through his mouth. It looked like he was starting to get winded. Cyril Gane was looking so confident. He stuffed the one double leg attempt. I know that doesn't mean everything, but it was looking very good for Cyril Gane. And Cyril Gane's striking, it's on another level. He was the better striker. Some people said that before, not everybody. I definitely felt that way. I think it was vindicated. I think he was doing great, and I was excited to see that play out. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see it. We get a no contest. I think everybody acknowledges that Cyril Gane won that first round, but nevertheless, Tom Aspinall's retained the belt. And what I had said from the get-go is one reason why I wanted Cyril Gane to win so badly is in the interest of this super fight, of the super fight between Alex Pereira and Jon Jones. This isn't because I am a huge fan of Alex Pereira, but it's not just because of my fandom of Alex Pereira or me being the biggest Jon Jones fan of all time. It's because I'm a fan of super fights. And this would have been the ultimate super fight and will be the ultimate super fight because I think it's going to happen now. And my whole point or part of my rationale for rooting for Cyril Gane, yes, I do like Cyril Gane as a fighter. Yes, I like him as a human. I think he's a great champ and a great representative of the UFC. But what I said from the get-go was that if Cyril Gane can win this fight, what will happen is it will automatically legitimize a super fight between Jon Jones and Alex Pereira. If Tom Aspinall wins, that fight will not be legitimized. In fact, people will say that Jon Jones is taking the easier fight. Why are we doing this? This is lame. People will be upset. Some people will be into it. I'd still watch it. I'd still love it. But a lot of people would... A lot of the big Tom Aspinall fans or the anti-Jon Jones folks or whatnot would really be crapping on that matchup, saying, well, Jon Jones is taking this easier fight. He's ducking Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall just smashed Cyril Gane, etc. He's the heavyweight champ. What is he doing? So that's why I was saying if Cyril Gane won and Jon Jones beat Cyril Gane very handily, then that would basically destroy any possible thought of people thinking that Tom Aspinall would beat Jon Jones. I know it's not a fair thing to say. Tom Aspinall still could have had a great shot against Jon Jones, but that's how it works in MMA math in the fans' minds. So it would have been like, okay, well, now the question has been answered of Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones in most people's mind. Boom. Jon is the GOAT. That's what would have happened. Now, of course, Cyril Gane didn't win, but something in the middle, I believe, has happened because... And it's because I think it's because of, honestly, all the hype that MMA Guru and other folks like that put behind Tom Aspinall, just saying that Jon Jones was running from him, which built up this narrative of Tom Aspinall being like this super amazing heavyweight fighter, the best of the best of the best, and he's going to just steamroll Gane. And when that didn't happen, I think a lot of that aura got taken away. Even though Gane didn't win the fight, just the fact that he won round one and then Tom Aspinall had to bow out because of the eye poke, I think automatically has, whether or not people are going to confidently say that Gane is better than Aspinall, yeah, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I think people are already like, wait a minute, we were pushing so hard for this guy to fight Jon Jones, and Cyril Gane, who we all thought was terrible because Jon Jones dismantled him so easily, he was basically beating Tom Aspinall in round one. So even though it wasn't a full-blown victory, I think that outcome has happened for the most part. And I think people will now get behind this fight and get really excited about Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira, especially if the rematch between Aspinall and Gane is delayed enough, or obviously if it happens and then Gane wins, obviously we're ready, set, go for Aspinall versus Jones versus Pereira. So I think this fight is going to happen. I think the UFC wants it to happen, even though Dana White publicly is saying he can't trust Jon. I think deep down he knows this has got to be the fight. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect for the White House card. So we're going to go through a bunch because there's a lot more to this. I want to go really deep as to why I think definitely now this is going to happen, because there's more to it in terms of some of the comments that Tom Aspinall's dad has made and Tom Aspinall has made in leading up to this fight week. I think a lot of these comments have probably pissed off the UFC, have made the UFC wary of Tom Aspinall, made them not probably want to build him as a star, which I totally understand. And I think this is going to add more fuel to the fire in terms of the UFC wanting to get this match made and wanting to downplay Tom Aspinall going forward. So we're going to talk about all of that. So let's get into it. Now, first and foremost, we're going to go to this tweet that happened just a couple hours ago, which I knew was coming. We were waiting for it. And Jon Jones did tweet this out. And this, again, supports my thesis, which is that Jon Jones was ready and waiting to make this post, assuming Gane won or the fight went some way like this. Even if Gane didn't win, but it was a decision or a close decision, or, it was a less glorious victory than Jones had over Gane. I had a feeling Jon Jones was going to tweet something, and of course he tweeted something. A couple hours after the fight ended, we have the no contest. Doesn't say anything to Tom, doesn't say anything to Gane, but he responds to Alex. He said, Alex, I'd be down to bring the highest skill level to the White House. I appreciate the respect you showed. Let's dance. I knew that something like this was going to happen, and then that's not me being a genius. We all, I think, figured that this was going to happen, but this is a silver lining from this terrible outcome, because I'm telling you, this is going to be such a fun super fight to see the perceived GOAT of the sport, Jon Jones, against Alex Pereira, who was on the verge of being the GOAT of the sport, coming together and fighting. We don't need a belt, or we don't need a heavyweight belt anymore, because now, at least for the time being, the aura of Tom Aspinall is gone. Cyril Gane, in most people's mind, was beating Tom Aspinall. Jon Jones easily beat Cyril Gane. So now it makes all the sense in the world. Why would Alex Pereira want to go up and challenge somebody else? He should be challenging the true GOAT of the sport for an amazing grand finale, and this fight's going to go down. So as we all predicted, as we all thought, Jon Bones Jones posts this out, tweets this out, and I think it's going to happen. Now, some other things have gone down during this week as well. One of the things that was posted was Tom Aspinall's dad saying that Tom Aspinall is planning to he doesn't want his son to re-sign with the UFC. He's got 3 fights left on his contract, only 2 now. Okay. And this is a big thing here, because he's basically got 2 fights. So what, they make the rematch, and then he's got 1 fight left. He takes his 1 fight and he dips and goes to box, which we know Dana White and the UFC doesn't like for many reasons. I'm going to go into more of those in a second. But it makes sense why they don't want their champs like Francis Ngannou and whatnot going into boxing. But we have this statement from Tom Aspinall's dad, and it's out there for everybody. So I think this is another reason. I'm going to play the clip right now. This is another reason why this is going to create more problems for Tom Aspinall and create more way higher likelihood that they're going to make this super fight between Alex Pereira and Jon Jones. So I'm going to play the clip, and then we're going to talk about it more.
You said that you wanted a boxing champion.
Yeah, for sure.
You're okay with an MMA champion, but you wanted a boxing champion.
Boxing for sure. The money is
More money. Yeah.
more money. Why not?
Would that be an outcome for him?
There's 3 more fights on the contract now.
Okay. So
And I don't want to sign a new contract.
okay.
Personally.
So that's why, because I asked him. He always talk about Stephen Miocic 3 defenses. Would he have 4? But he said no. It's not in my mind.
Yeah, no. Only 1 fight. We only ever think 1 fight. So win, lose, next fight.
I'm excited that Andy told me Tom will be a boxing champion by 2020.
The MMA community reacted to the statement, and as usual...
So that's the end of the clip. I was going to leave it right there, but actually there's some good tweets in when they say this, the MMA community responded. And I want to show some of these tweets because they're going to give me context to talk about this statement and why it's so important and why I think it's going to be a major problem for Tom Aspinall and his team going forward in the UFC with the remaining 2 fights, I guess, because apparently they're not going to re-sign. Check this out.
Opinions are divided. Some fans are criticizing Tom Aspinall's father, while others are blaming the UFC for fighters not getting paid enough. One fan wrote, "This is what happens when the UFC pays their fighters peanuts. There's more money in boxing, so of course they want to make the move. He's one of those helicopter parents who crush their kid with pressure and expectations. You can see it in the tone. He's way too confident and Tom's way too submissive. If he loses to Gane, his dad's going to wreck his mental state. Not gonna lie, Andy, shut the f*** up. I need Tom to be the heavyweight GOAT. Great for the heavyweight champ to say that he's not interested in sticking around. I'm sure the UFC would love to put their marketing...
Okay, so this is the one. This is the one that I think is the most relevant. So people think that the UFC needs to pay more. They need to do all these things. What you have to remember along the way, and I'm not saying one way or the other, okay, but I'm just saying you need to have some perspective here. You need to recognize that the UFC is a little bit different than boxing organizations or promotions because they're not just paying them at the end of the day for these fights. They have a marketing mechanism and machine in place to build these guys into stars. Had it not been for the UFC, nobody would know who Tom Aspinall is. Nobody would know who Alex Pereira is. So they're not just paying them for the fights; they're building them as stars. They're doing promotions. They're having them do interviews. They're helping them build up this name value. Which then, when they want to go to boxing, what they're doing is they're exploiting the name value that the UFC has helped them build, and then they're exploiting that name value, which the UFC paid for. So, look, am I saying that fighters shouldn't be able to do that? No, but it's easy to say that, like, oh, UFC doesn't pay well. Also, they're investing in these fighters to build them up. So yeah, the boxing, they're maybe able to pay more because they're not doing any of that marketing. They're not doing any of that build up throughout the careers of the fighters. And so when a MMA fighter comes over and they have this already established clout, this fame, this following, and they go in and fight, yeah, it's easy to pay them a little bit more because they're going to bring in an audience. They're going to bring in numbers. They're going to bring in tickets. So just pointing that out, that sometimes people, I think, simplify this a little bit too much. And to answer the question of could the UFC potentially pay more, it's a very complicated question, and it's something that I want to get into one day when I have the proper knowledge and the right expert to talk about the financial breakdown of the UFC's expenditures and revenue and whatnot, because could they, it's more complex than could they just pay the fighters double or triple what they're making now. It's more complex than that because you have to take into account their long-term strategy for growth. If the UFC back from day one was literally paying their fighters the absolute max they could and not reinvesting into the company wouldn't be where it is today. And the fighter salaries would suffer right now because they would have never built up the following that they have now. The complaints aren't fair when you have to think about, like, back in the day they were making $5,000 for main event fights for the early UFCs, or $10,000, or nothing compared to what they're making now with the millions of dollars. And that's because they've had this really good strategy of investing back into the company, building up the marketing, building up the fan base appropriately. So anyways, I'm going off on a tangent here, but it comes back to this point right here. Great for the heavyweight champ to say that he's not interested in sticking around. I'm sure the UFC would love to put their marketing behind him, but that's a very good point. Why would the UFC want to now support Tom Aspinall when his dad, who's his manager, who's like probably the most vocal member of his team, the person that he listens to the most, if he's saying he doesn't want to re-sign after 3 years and he wants to go and box, the UFC, I'm sure, is going to hear that, and they're not going to play nice with Tom Aspinall anymore, because why would they do that? From their perspective, he's going to take all this money and effort that they put into Tom to build him up as a star. He's going to bounce. He's going to go to boxing. That's going to look bad on the UFC, because the more fighters that are trying to leave the UFC and go to boxing, it affects the value of the brand. It's saying that the UFC, whether it's true or not, but it creates that perception that the UFC is below boxing. Boxing is the pinnacle where people want to go. And then on top of that, the UFC fighters go there and they usually lose, because obviously they're not boxers, okay? In a regular full-on fight, of course the UFC fighters will win every time, but they go and they lose. And then it creates this perception that boxers, for people that are like, don't know anything, but still creates the perception that the boxers are superior fighters to mixed martial artists, which is not true. There's multiple problems. So all of this to say that these comments are bad, that they got out really bad, and I think it's gonna affect Tom Aspinall negatively, but it's gonna lay the runway and the foundation for the Jon Jones and Alex Pereira fight that much more so. So that's the silver lining. We can be happy about that. Something else happened this week via Tom Aspinall as well, where he's talking about not wanting to fight one of his buddies who's a top 10 heavyweight fighter, and said he'd rather vacate than face this guy. Dana White had some harsh words. It says many friends, relatives, name it, have fought each other before. It doesn't matter whether you're friends with somebody or you hate somebody. You're competing with them to see who the best is. But that's his decision. To even think about vacating it because you don't want to compete against somebody is insane, Dana White says. But he's a grown man. That's up to him. Now, do I necessarily agree with Dana White? I don't. I've never been a fighter, and I can understand you have a brotherhood with somebody. You're super close to somebody. Like, would we ever expect to see Islam fight Habib or things like that? Merab fight Aljo? No, but we know how Dana, regardless, it doesn't matter. Dana White does not like this. And I understand that, because if people keep saying, I'm not going to fight this person because I have a relationship, that can be a problem for the UFC when they're matchmaking. If there's too many of these relationships that develop, right? Because fighters train, they go to different gyms, and if they start developing bonds like this and they say, now I don't want to fight them, that could be problematic for the UFC. So of course he wants to smash any notion of this being an acceptable practice. Now, Tom Aspinall saying this and his father saying this, the other thing about the boxing in the same week, that's going to be a real problem, which again means the UFC is not going to want to do Tom any favors. And we're going to get more specific into how that's going to play out with all of this in a moment. So what do I think the UFC is going to do now? Okay. I think the UFC, before they get him to do this rematch, they're going to have him sign a new contract, because his dad, Andy, in that video said he has 3 fights left on the contract, but he just fought. So now there's 2 fights left. Okay. Now that the UFC is aware that Tom Aspinall wants to take, build up his fame, dip, and then try and be a boxing champ, or try and get some boxing matches, they obviously don't want that. So they're going to say, hey, we can turn around and we can book this fight for you, but we need you to sign a new contract. And we're going to sign a 3-fight extension. I'm sure they'll make it a nice deal, but they don't want another Francis Ngannou situation. So they're going to extend that contract. Now, will Tom Aspinall say yes? I mean, it's possible if the numbers are right and they make everything work. I think it's possible. But he might try and hold out, might try and say no. But I think that's what the UFC is going to do, because now it's 2 fights, especially if he wants to fight relatively soon, let's say January, February, March. He fights that fight. He's got 1 fight left. He's out in the summer of 2026. He's going to bounce. I think that's going to be a really bad look for the UFC. So if he says no, okay, let's say he says, I don't want to fight. All right, sorry, I don't want to sign a new contract. I think there's going to be one of 2 things. Either the UFC is going to try and book this fight immediately to give Gane the advantage, right? And I'm going to talk about what that advantage is in a second in terms of that eye poke injury and a possible detached retina. Or they're going to stall this rematch until after the White House card. This is if Tom refuses to sign. It's going to be one of these 2 things. I actually think it's going to be the latter. I think they're going to, because it makes the most sense. If Tom's talking about wanting to go to boxing, Tom's talking about wanting to vacate because he doesn't want to fight his friend. This is a problem for the UFC, especially after them trying to make the Jon Jones fight and do all these things for Tom. It makes no sense to invest in him if he's going to be gone somewhere in 2026 or maybe the beginning of 2027. So what I think they'll do is they'll say, okay, we can either give you like January or December, something, not December, there's no fights, big fight cards left in December, but they'll try and do some quick turnaround. They'll say, no, I can't do that. I still need to recover. Okay, the next time we have for you is July. So they'll push that fight. And then in the meantime, since he won't have a chance to rectify that performance against Cyril Gane, they will keep that perception in our mind that Jon Jones is the GOAT. He probably would have beaten Tom Aspinall. Again, I'm not saying that's 100% the case, but that will be the perception. We can make the super fight with Alex Pereira. He's going to come up. We'll have this GOAT super fight at the White House. It's going to be unbelievable. And then let Tom and Cyril fight after that. And after that, it won't matter. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, coming back to this notion of trying to pressure Tom to, if he refuses to re-sign the contract, trying to pressure him to fight sooner rather than later, is coming from this possibility that there's a detached retina with Tom Aspinall because of the severity of the eye poke, right? It could be a corneal abrasion. Those usually heal relatively quickly. But if it is indeed a detached retina, it's going to be a long process of recovery, a long road of recovery, right? They said 1 to 3 months, gradual improvement in vision and comfort, but usually 3 to 6 months, most of the vision should be restored. It could take longer. Theoretically, could be shorter, but that eye could likely be compromised. And as a result, if they push Tom into a fight earlier, giving Cyril Gane a disadvantage, giving Cyril Gane the advantage, I think that's the direction they might go. This is more speculative, but I feel like the UFC has done things like this in the past, maybe get fighters to fight in timelines or locations or whatever, where they have to do a short turnaround and they know it's going to probably affect them, like not definitively, but just giving a little advantage to the fighter who's got more star potential. Let's put it like that, right? So I could see them doing something like this. And on top of that, Cyril Gane would have great star potential, being the first ever French undisputed heavyweight champ. I know there's a lot of good stuff there. He's definitely going to be sticking around. I don't think Cyril Gane's not talking about kickboxing or doing anything else. He's like a loyal UFC fighter guy. So the last thing I'll say too, by the way, is just coming back to my whole monologue on Fighter Pay. I think in the long run that fighter pay will increase and will continue to increase and will eventually trump boxing, because I do think that MMA is the better product. And at the end of the day, with the better product and the greater platform that's now going to be provided via Paramount, plus the fan base is growing because a lot of young kids right now are super into MMA, not into boxing. So as they grow up, I think the fan base of adults is going to grow exponentially compared to boxing. I feel like boxing is on the decline. There's not as many young people coming up right now talking about, oh my God, they're talking about UFC. So as the fan base grows, as more money comes into the sport, I do think now that everything is going to sort of rise up. That's my belief. People think that the UFC just wants to rip off fighters. I don't think it's like that. I think it's a business just like anything else. And I think as revenue and profits increase and the fan base grows, the fighters' pay will increase as well. And we won't have so many people thinking like, oh, I got to go to boxing. Nah, it's going to be, you want to be in the UFC to make the most money possible. That's just the end of that little monologue. But I digress. Going back to the crux of this entire video, this fight will happen. Mark my words. And this is my whole reason, again, why I wanted Cyril Gane to win. And I believe, even though this outcome is a bummer, even though this outcome is very disappointing, the silver lining is this fight's going to go down at the White House, will be the biggest fight of all time, will be the most watched fight of all time, because it's going to be broadcasted for free on ABC. So there you go. Silver lining. Celebrate this, at least if you're a fan of mixed martial arts in the UFC. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And are you also super excited for this Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira fight? Or do you feel it's not the one you want? Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.